is that if a trainer or facilitator is up in front of the room just telling people what they need to do
Hmm.
to be better at their jobs, you need to do this and you need to do that, and if you don't do this, then this thing is going to happen. None of that is going to work.
Warning: Damian Andrews' growing revenue and profit, if implemented, will put more money in your pocket. Please use with caution.
Welcome to Damian Andrews' Growing Revenue and Profit with international speaker and revenue and growth specialist Damian Andrews. This is your source for practical, usable, and simple action steps that you can do every day to put more money in your pocket. And now, the host of Damian Andrews' Growing Revenue and Profit, Damian Andrews.
And the crowd cheers wildly to the trumpeting blasts of elephants sliding through eyes of needles. This is Damian Andrews' Growing Revenue and Profit, the program that deals with all things that puts more cash in your pocket. This is the show that handles your revenue riddles, profit puzzles, operational oddities, and culture conundrums. I am the one, the only Damian Andrews, and on this show, it is my pleasure and honor to welcome the wonderful and amazing David D. Doerrier. Now, David works with individuals and businesses to transform their presentations, training, sales pitches into unforgettable experiences. David is a public speaking expert with 30 years of experience in training and development. His diverse background includes radio broadcasting, corporate training, stage acting, military service, voiceover work, and even being a Santa Claus. David is also the author of How Adults Learn: Principles of Engagement. David, such a pleasure to have you on the show. Such an amazing background. Thank you for making the time.
Well, thank you, Damien. I wanted to give you a hand for that great introduction. That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. You've got the background there, and we were talking in the pre-show about similar backgrounds and how we both have done a bit of acting school. So we've got to bring that in, and that's really important with presentations. Let's dive straight in deep. Where do you think organizations, when we're talking about growing revenue and profits, and not the people that give sage advice, but the money in the bank, where do you think they struggle with getting these presentations across, their sales pitches, getting those extra sales? What are the key things they struggle with?
Well, that's a great question, Damien. And right off the bat, my experience in corporate was in training and development, and my observation was that there wasn't enough feedback or good feedback that the trainers were getting, the sales staff were getting, and others within the organization were getting about their presentation skills or how well they were getting across to people. What I was observing with trainers specifically, that in many cases, the organization is making a sale of some sort to an external company. Now that the sale has been made, the papers have all been signed, the software has now been implemented. Now the trainer shows up and they are working with the users of this product or the software. And in many cases, the users or the people that are being trained on how to use this product, this is their only exposure to the company that sold this stuff. The only exposure is now this trainer.
Yeah.
And if the trainer does a bad job, which I'm not saying it happen all the time, but it does happen. And if the trainer does a bad,
from time to time, yeah.
exactly. And if the trainer does a bad job, this is the only person that these users are exposed to with that selling organization. So now in those the user's mind, they're thinking, well, if this guy is horrible, if we can't learn anything from this guy, what's going
Mm,
to happen when we have to call customer service? What's going to
mm,
happen when we've got some other problem going on? And then at some point down the road, the selling organization calls up the buyers and says, hey, you've had our software for X amount of time. How about looking at this other piece of software that we'd like to sell you? And there's like, no way. If
yeah.
we've had such a horrible experience. So I think to answer your question, it's getting good reviews, good feedback, good evaluations, periodic evaluations on the presentation skills, and giving everyone the initial training that they need. Many trainers are moved into a training position because they've been with the organization for a period of time. They know the
Mm.
product. So who better to train it than the person who knows a lot about it?
I love that. What you're talking about there is that full integration of service, because you have the slick salesperson come in and do this wonderful presentation, and they buy it. And that's a skill in and of itself, creating that trust. At the end of the day, sales is about trust. And what you're talking about there is that next step where that trust is then broken. It becomes, how, what happened? We got this wonderful experience, and then this
Mhm.
lifetime value of the custom, which I think is really underappreciated in today's
Right.
world, is creating that relationship, that ongoing relationship where when that salesperson calls up, as you said, they go,
Mhm.
oh, yes, we would love to have something else because we've got this other problem that we need help with. But at the
Mhm.
moment, what you're saying is because those presentation skills are not there, not only
Mhm.
you what you're doing is creating another problem for the company rather than solving a problem. Is that am I
Right.
hearing you correctly?
Yes, and in most cases, if not all cases, the people that were going through the sales process are not the people that are going to be eventually going through the end user training. There's a
Mm,
total disconnect between the people that were part of the sales process and now the end user training.
yeah.
And those folks that are going through the end user training, they all have to work with this new product. And because the training was so bad, all they're left with is a million questions. And the other thing that I've observed is the software that they've purchased. Now, I'm talking about software because most of the companies I worked with in corporate were all around software implementations in
Mhm.
healthcare.
Yep.
And the software will do 1,000 things.
Mhm.
But because the training was so bad, the end users are only using it for half of what it can do.
If that.
And exactly. So now a competitor comes
Mm.
in and they
Mm.
make a great sales presentation
Ooh.
and and is now selling all of the features that yes, our software will do,
Mhm.
but because they weren't trained properly, they don't know how to use it and don't even
Mm.
know that it's there. So now people were migrating over to a competitor because they did such a better job of selling that product.
What do you think is the blocker from your experience that stops these presentations from coming across, exceptionally well, as you put forward, creating this unforgettable experience? What is the blockers that stop people from being able to present that way? And that, I mean, that's assuming the salesperson can even deliver that.
Right. So focusing just on the trainer at this
Mm.
point, because
Yeah.
let's say the sale has happened,
Yep. Okay.
and then the trainer now goes in. I think it goes back to that the trainers were not trained properly on how to train. That
Mm.
many trainers, what I've seen, is that they believe that just going in and just talking to people is training.
Yeah.
My tagline is talking and telling ain't training or selling.
Mm.
And it also goes back to number one, they haven't been trained on how to be effective trainers or engaging trainers.
Mhm.
And they're not getting any feedback. The only feedback that they get is imagine that you're in a training session.
Mhm.
Imagine that you've been in that training session for 5 days,
Yeah.
and now it's now 5 o'clock in the evening on a Friday afternoon, and the trainer says, "Oh, here's the evaluation form, and as soon as you fill this out, you can leave." Well,
Mm.
what they're doing is the people that are in the room, boom, 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 and they're out of there as quickly as possible. You mean the faster I sign this thing or the faster I fill out this evaluation form, the
Yeah.
sooner I can be in my car? I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So they're not getting good evaluations from the people in the room, and they're not being evaluated by their peers or by their superiors.
Yeah. I will. I'll put my hand up. I've done that. I've done that. That kind of evaluation is, yeah, you just want to get out of there, and you're
Right.
not going to say anything bad to start with.
Right.
Majority of the time, you just want to go, yep, I'm going to move on. From that perspective, because what we're talking about here, and I break things up for an organization to set goals in three areas. One is the revenue, monetary goals. The other one is operational, and the third is culture. So what you're talking about here is largely the operational side of things, those operational oddities we're talking about. And with
Mhm.
that, as you say, talking is not, is not selling. Talking is not training. What is the difference? Can you explain that difference between talking and having that detail to, again, create that unforgettable experience?
Great question. So now we get into the adult learning theory or the principles of engagement. And there are 8 principles of engagement. And I think one of the biggest, there are many, there are many pieces to this, but there's one piece that gets missed most often when it comes to training, and that is the simple step of setting the stage. What are we doing? Why
Mm,
are we doing it? How are we going to do it? And when we get to the end of this training, what should you as participants, what should you know better?
mm,
So, so that's part of it, is setting the stage of what are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we going to do it? And when we get to the end, what are you going to take away? Now that's one piece. The other pieces are the is understanding how the adult retains information. They
mhm,
don't retain information by just talking to them and hoping that it sticks. The adult wants to be involved in the training. They want to
mm,
be challenged in the training. So starting off with questions at the beginning, the the one of the so let me talk about one of those 8 principles, and that is the principle of complexity.
mhm,
And this is one of the areas that I found that I worked with IT folks that were moving into training, and this was the one that they struggled with the most.
mhm,
Is the principle of complexity is all about first understanding your audience.
yeah,
Where is my audience right now with their current understanding of the topic?
mhm,
And I like using the visual of a swimming pool
mhm.
where and Damien, have you ever experienced a trainer or a speaker who immediately opened up and was talking over your head just
Yes. I
based on
think,
that?
at one point in time, I may have been that speaker as well, if I'm gonna be honest.
I know I've been there too. That and so I relate that to that speaker, that facilitator dove straight into the deep end of the pool
Yeah.
where
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
where the audience
Mm,
is down there at the shallow end of the pool because based on their current knowledge level of the topic, they're down there at the shallow end of the pool. Some
mhm.
of them are in the kiddie pool. Some of them haven't even put on their swimming trunks yet.
Yeah, good
So,
point. Great analogy.
because the facilitator didn't evaluate, they dove in this deep end of the pool and then took everybody with them and drowned them.
Mhm,
So the principle of complexity is understanding your audience, understanding what are the objectives of the class today, meeting your audience where they are, and then slowly bringing them with you to meet those objectives down there at the deeper end of the pool.
Is what you're talking about there sounds like what you're asking the trainers to do, the people that are going in and doing, from an organizational perspective, from a practical perspective. You've made the sale, you've got people in there working with them to help integrate well. What you're talking about sounds like creating an empathy, teaching people empathy about how to actually fully understand what is the situation I'm dealing with, having that sensitivity to knowing what's going on. Is that part of what you're training there?
Sure, yeah, I would say so. That's a good way to look at it. That empathy, when you were saying that, what came up in my mind is that being a trainer is like running a marathon.
Mm,
It's you get to the end of the day, and trainers will say, "Man, that was quite a workout." It is a workout. It's a physical workout. It's a mental workout because you have to understand your objectives. You have to understand your audience. You have to be open to questions. You have to
mm,
understand how to respond to these questions. It is nonstop. What time are we going to take a break? What time are we going to break for lunch? All of these things are important. Asking questions properly. It's like running a marathon when you get to the end of the training day. So
mm.
yes, having empathy, understanding your audience, listening to your audience, and meeting the objectives of the day. It's a workout.
From the perspective, because your book is about how adults learn principles of engagement, and I wonder about it because they say children learn faster than adults. And to me, that doesn't make sense. And I remember when I was doing my motorbike training to get my motorbike license, I'd ridden motorbikes since I was a kid, and I'm not saying that I rode illegally, but I'm not telling the truth there. Um, so, but I remember the class when I was doing that class. They talked about how an adult will actually have a much less chance of having an accident because they have a broader range of experience, of life experience.
Mhm.
And so from that, using that principle as an analogy, I always found that comment about children learning faster than adults as a bit of an oxymoron. It just doesn't seem to fit. What is it that prevents adults from learning?
Well, I think a lot of what prevents adults from learning is the way that they're being taught would be number one.
Mhm,
Like if they're not being engaged, if they're not being challenged, there's two pieces there that I want to talk about, what you brought up about the motorcycle or the
mm,
motorbike training, is that because of all of those life experiences that you've had, all of those are going to contribute to how well you learn how to ride that motorbike and how well you're going to retain that information. And as
mhm,
a facilitator, I want to tap into those experiences that you've
mm,
had in the past, those experiences that relate to this new topic. And
mhm,
if you are one person in a classroom full of other people, maybe you have an experience, you have not had something that relates to this topic, but maybe
mm,
someone else in the room, and getting them to talk about their experience that relates to this topic is going to be very beneficial for you to learn it, because when you learn
yeah,
it from one of your peers, it also sticks. So I definitely agree with that. All of your life experiences certainly can contribute to how well you're going to retain that information. That's another thing that the facilitator needs to know. They need to know that, number one, as a facilitator, I don't have to know everything.
mm,
What I need to be able to know is I need to know the objectives of our course, and I need to know good questioning techniques, because my students, my participants, you guys can bring us through all of this training. How would you deal with this? What have you done when you face this situation? What kind of things would go wrong if this happened? Getting all of you to contribute. So getting you to contribute with all of those life experiences. Now, I have never trained children. I don't have children, but
Mm.
I have talked to educators of children about that question that you asked about the different learning styles between adults and children. And
Mm.
what I hear from them is that, number one, children, yes, they have distractions, but they don't have the types of distractions that adults
Mm.
have. That
Right.
right now, the children's full-time job is going to school. And,
Mm.
and so that is what I understand is the difference between the child learner and the adult learner.
And from that perspective, if we're looking at an organization that's implementing a change, for example, and what you're talking about there, we've got, using that implementing of the software. So you've got people that they need to say, okay, let's do this differently. And an example, one of the clients I had, they were second generation engineering company with a lot of long-term employees. A lot of them, there was, well, not a lot, but there was a number that had been there for 30 odd years.
Mhm.
And the company was still using a handwritten timesheet to record what
Mm.
they were doing. And it wasn't even a punch card. They literally wrote on this timesheet.
Mhm.
And what they needed to, that what they wanted to do was to go to an electronic system where they were using a phone, an app on a phone where they could do that. So obviously, you've got a lot of older men, needing to learn something different. And I delivered a training to implement that. And within that 2 hour training, half of the audience had downloaded the app, logged in, created an account, um, and started to use that from a practical point of view. So, from
Mhm.
that side of things, what are tips that you can give an organization in that, using that as an analogy, in that situation where they've got to make an organization, for the business owners that are listening, they've got to make a change, something like that, where they've got
Mhm.
people that are fairly entrenched in what they're doing. What are key things that they can do to set up a system where they can integrate that change quickly and effectively?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, that example that you gave, because I faced an almost identical situation when I was a contractor working at Turner Broadcasting. They have
Yeah.
CNN and a variety of other channels,
Yes.
and they were going from a paper-based expense report system
Hmm.
to an online expense report system,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of resistance to it, very similar to what you described. So what I had to do, and this is another one of the principles of engagement, it's called the principle of ownership.
Hmm.
And this will work with any situation where you have that resistance. Where now you have to get your audience to take ownership in accepting this new policy, or accepting this new process, or accepting this new X, fill in the blank. And the only way that, and let's use your example, that you had half of your class that were resistant to this. Well,
Mm.
let me explain what I had to do to get them to own it. And that was, I was able to show my audience by going to this online expense report system that if they were able to get their expense report in by noonish on Tuesday, and their manager was able to approve it electronically by Wednesday noonish, their money from that expense report would be in their bank by Friday, before the end of the day on Friday.
Yeah.
So there I had them, because with the paper-based expense report system, and you can imagine an organization as large as Turner Broadcasting,
Hmm.
that paper-based expense report had to go through the internal mail system, end up on somebody's desk
Yes.
on this pile, and then that person would eventually get to it. They'd notice an error on this paper-based expense report. It now would have to go back through the mail system, get back to the person. Maybe they're traveling, who knows where. And when they eventually get that expense report back in their hand, the credit card company's saying, "Hey, where's our money?" And so now they're having to pay it out of their own pocket. But I
Mm.
was able to show them that they could get their money within less than a week And so that was where they took ownership. Yes, I now need to learn this new process.
So from that perspective, you're really highlighting for them the benefit of what that change is, how it actually is beneficial to them.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's all about it's also about the WIFM.
Mhm.
What's in it for me? WIIFM. And
Yes.
if the adult doesn't understand the WIFM, if they don't understand the benefit, the value, they're going to tune out.
And how do we, with that change, implementing the change, and with the presenters, how do you deal with complaints? Because from my experience, there's only two things people complain about: the way things are and change.
Mm.
So how do you address those two? How do you address those complaints that come in implementing that change?
The first thing that comes to my mind, that's a great question. Is that I would want to involve the participants. I would want to involve them in the decision making on, we have to come up with a new process. This
Mhm.
is our process that we've used for years. We've all seen the good about the process. We've all seen the bad about the process. We all now need to work together to design a new process. Yes,
Mm.
me as the leader or you as the leader, you've got your ideas, and maybe if there was no resistance, you would implement all your ideas.
Mhm.
But the I need to get their ownership. I want to get their buy-in. So
Mhm.
I need to hear from them. Maybe they have some new ideas that I didn't even think of. And by them now contributing to this process, you're going to have more of that buy-in.
I love that point. Where I wanna take that is, I have a friend, several years ago, this is pre-COVID, he had a business, he was working flat out in the business, and it was a large business, it was turning over about 80 million. He got really sick because he was working flat out all the time, and he was bedridden for 9 months, couldn't get out of bed. He had good systems in place, so he was getting reporting and things like that. What
Mm.
happened in that period, and this is astounding, but the company had very, very good systems. While he was not there, the employees took the business from 80 million to nearly 100 million, and he realized
Mm.
he needed to get out of the way. Now, from this
Mm.
perspective of implementing change, by the way, now he's he doesn't go to the business very much. He's got his reporting, it works really well. He took his motorbike and went and rode around Mongolia for 3 months.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
but from that perspective, how often do you find with that change and implementing the change that there needs to be that really strong buy-in from upper leadership,
Mm.
and the ability for them, especially when you're dealing with a business owner type business, their ability to let go and allow that change to happen?
Yeah, a great question. So it all starts from above.
Mm,
That if you don't have the buy-in from them, part of my training career was leadership training,
mhm,
and I've seen good and bad in the leadership training. The bad usually is, why am I here in this training? My manager doesn't use any of these processes. My manager has been here and doesn't demonstrate any of these things that you're teaching. So
mhm.
why should I implement any of this? And the only reason I'm here is because of the great lunch that you provide every day.
Hopefully, it's
So
great.
yes, well, it is. If I'm training, I pick the lunch.
Awesome, I love
Yeah.
it.
So the point there is that it has to come from above. And being in training and development for the number of years that I was in, that you can't make a change unless the people at the top are endorsing it, are promoting it, and are demonstrating the benefits or demonstrating the qualities of it. I'm trying to remember the other part of your question. It's the
Well, I mean,
oh
quite
oh oh, no, I now I remember from leadership, and that is the the one course that I taught that people struggled with the most was delegation, because
Mm.
managers had a very difficult time giving up their the their just of releasing some of this work. It'll be faster if I do it myself. It'll
Mhm.
take me too long to train somebody else. I'm the only one who knows this. Oh, that person, they'll never get it. They'll never get it. That was the course that had the biggest ahas that I trained, was people delegating. And I
Mm.
and so I think what you were saying about this gentleman who was bedridden for 9 months and the company flourished, if he had delegated more while he was doing well, he
Mhm.
could have seen people's potential, and maybe they would have even been he would have never been bedridden, because he would have been able to release a lot of this stuff.
That's the point I wanted to get to, because I see that a lot in the work that I do, where the block is in the leadership. And this willingness to, as you said, the delegation component is, you create some of those aha moments. What are
Mhm.
some ways from your perspective, from your experience, I mean, where you've worked through that with companies, you've gone in there to do some training, realized that it's not happening? Because I've seen it many times where you go in, they've got the manual, it's sitting on the desk or on a shelf somewhere collecting dust, and not being used because it's not being implemented at that high level. What are some techniques that you've done to help people awaken to that point of, this needs to come from above and you need to embrace it?
It's going back to that principle of ownership,
Mm.
is to set up the conversation in a way. It's not me telling leadership what they need to do to make sure that this is going to be a success. It's me facilitating the conversation in a way where those leaders are discovering the solutions on their own, because and that's the same thing in training,
Mhm.
is that if a trainer or facilitator is up in front of the room just telling people what they need to do
Mhm.
to be better at their jobs, you need to do this and you need to do that, and if you don't do this, then this thing is going to happen, none of that is going to work.
Mhm.
It's me facilitating the conversation where my audience is, now I understand, now I see the benefit, now I understand why we're doing this and what the value is. And that's the same approach that I would take with leadership. And if they don't get it, some of the questions I would ask is, well, what are your goals? Why are they your goals?
Mhm.
What happens if nothing is changed? How long can you continue to work this way? And
Mhm.
what does success look like? How will you know you have reached success? How are you going to measure this success? So those are some of the questions that I would want to ask.
I love that. And what you're coming back to there, underarching, there's a new word, overarching, is the communication. And I know from my research, my research is correct, going back, we're going to jump in the Wayback Machine, and I love, it's one of my favorite things because it's a silver DeLorean. Doc Brown invented it. You hit 88 miles an hour, you can travel through time. So can you jump in that, in the driver's seat, put your foot to the floor, I'll strap in and hold on. But I understand exactly. Could I understand? Because you grew up in Long Island, and from what I understand, you were a shy kid.
Yeah.
So can you talk us through that? Is this communication of, in training people, being able to train people effectively, being able to communicate to your employees your vision, is this communication something that's just naturally inherent, or is it something that's taught that you can learn?
That's a great question. Growing up as a kid, like you said, I was a shy, pimply little kid. Growing up in Long Island. If I could find a cave to crawl up into, that would have been my dream. I was the oldest of five kids. not to get into, a lot of the turmoil and challenges I had as a child, but I didn't talk. I didn't communicate with anybody, because if I talked, I was being judged by my family. I was being judged by kids in school, so I didn't talk. But
Mm.
I had a fascination with radio, and I went to bed at night with a little transistor radio under my pillow. After
I
high
remember
school, I went,
transistor radios. I'm old enough.
yeah, those, yeah, little transistor under the pillow. And, I bring that up because I think that was really the start of it. Yes, I went in the military after high school, went into the United States Air Force, and spent a total of 28 years, 10 years active and 18 years in the reserves. But it was radio broadcasting when I got a chance to start in radio when I was still active duty. Now I was having to learn communication. I was
Mhm.
having to learn how to talk on the radio, what radio was all about. Now, one of
Mhm.
the things that I learned quickly, because I learned everything about this communication process by the seat of my pants.
Yeah.
Yes, I've read books and I've been to workshops, but I haven't been to college for this. But
Mm.
I learned it by the seat of my pants. But what I got a lot of good training from the program directors I worked for. And one of the things that I've never forgotten is that radio, you are, even though you're talking to thousands of people, you're addressing your audience as if you're talking to one person. You never
Mhm.
say you all. I'm glad you all are here. Thank you all for tuning in today.
Mm.
It's thank you. I'm glad you're able to make time to be with me today. I hope you're having a great day. Isn't it sunny outside? I hope you're enjoying the sunny weather outside today. So, talking to each person individually, and I bring that into my communication. So, where did it all change? I I guess it's like the actor
Mhm.
who just never saw themselves on stage. They saw themselves as a shy person, and now all of a sudden things just started clicking. That
Mhm.
when I was introduced to training in the Air Force, it just clicked. The understanding the meaning of objectives, the difference of objectives versus tasks.
Mhm.
Many people through my 30 years in training and development, there were many people that I came across that were in the business of training that didn't understand the definition of an objective versus
Mm.
a task. And that seemed to have come somewhat naturally to me.
Mm.
So I hope I'm answering your question there. Is just I think a lot of it was inside of me, but I think as a shy person, as an introverted person, what I've learned about us is that we're good listeners. We're
Mm.
good observers of others. So I'm able to feel my audience really well.
Yeah, I love that. And you're coming back to that sensitive component, which is something we promote. Have an organization called Be Manly and the Legends of Humanity, where it's to encourage men, boys and men, to embrace that sensitivity, that compassion, because you actually
Mhm,
get a lot of information from that, and we have that inside you. But from
mhm.
that experience, what you were talking about there, because I was just wondering, when you talk about introverts, and as you say, you were listening, how important does that, and maybe it's a rhetorical question, but I'd like you to expand on it if you could for the audience, is how important is that listening component when you're actually implementing a change? So in the operational component we were talking about here, you want to implement a change. How important is listening to what's going on to actually effectively implementing that change?
Well, listening is the most important part.
Mhm.
Even in acting, I'm going to use that analogy as well. That there was a program here in the States, and maybe it was in Australia, called the Actors Studio, and there's an acting school in New York called
Mhm.
the Actors Studio, and it was all about the craft of acting.
Mhm.
And one of the questions that was asked just about every time was, "What's the most important part of acting?"
Mhm.
And that is listening. That It's like I relate it to a tennis match, that when
Mm,
you hit the ball to me, I have to react to where is that ball? How hard did you hit it? Where did you hit it? And then I have to hit it back to you. It's the same thing in communication, is
mhm,
that by listening, I'm listening to how you're delivering a line to me. Or in an
mm,
organization, what are you saying to me?
mhm,
How are you saying it to me? What's behind all of that? I need to learn what, yes, you're giving me those words, but what's behind all of that? What's
mm,
causing you to say that or feel that way? It's having that empathy as well. So it's having that conversation. It's a tennis match, and it's most important part of communication is listening. And not only
mm.
with your ears, you're listening with your eyes.
Very much so. Where does that connect as well when we're talking about listening to listening to yourself as well? So
Mm.
as a leader within an organization, or someone, when I say leader, you can be the trainer that's teaching, you could be the CEO. But from that perspective, I think we've all had that experience. Well, we may, or let's frame it this way. We've all seen someone have what they call a learning experience. And you said, "Oh, I just had a learning experience." And how often have we watched that same person go and do that same thing again and repeat that learning experience? When we're talking about integrating and presenting, as you're talking about, how do we communicate in a way? Because how do we communicate a way that without change integrates? And what I'm getting at with that is, when we know something consciously, it's not how we act. We act from our unconscious. So that training, that change needs to happen at that unconscious level. Because we've all had. I think we've all had that experience where we've done something, we thought we knew it, and then we've done poorly at it, and then we've had the opposite where we didn't think we knew it, but we performed really well. Is there ways of communicating with people that can help that sink in so it becomes something that people integrate and act on in a more rapid manner?
Great question. I think two things have to happen there. If I understand the question correctly, is that the first thing that needs to happen is that that receiver, that person, they've got to be open to
Mm,
listen.
yeah,
They can't be closed. I know it all already. You don't have to tell me anything. Just leave me alone. Okay, fine. You
that's
you
me at
told me
18.
what you needed to. What's that?
That was me at 18. I know it all.
No,
You can't tell me.
yeah, exactly. And so number one, the person needs to be open to
Mm,
listening and wanting to make a change.
mhm,
And the person who's giving the feedback needs to give it in a way that other people can hear it. If I was giving you feedback, I need to do so I need to say it to your hearing or to
mhm,
your listening.
mhm,
And I need to do it more, not talking, but I need to do it in a maybe asking more questions of, what was your objective? How do you feel that you did today? What were some things that you feel you did well? What were some areas you feel that you struggled in? Why
mhm,
do you think you struggled in that? So I would be asking more questions than
mhm.
talking.
Yeah, that's wise advice. If we take that a step further with your the work that you do, because you say if you're struggling to convey a message, need to be putting it into a logical, structured, and polished manner. What are some tips people can take away from? Can you give some practical examples of some tips that people can take away how to do that, how to put it into a logical, structured, and polished manner?
Good question. So the first thing is there needs to be an objective. What
Mm,
there's a million questions that I would add if you came to me and said that you wanted to put together a keynote speech or a presentation or an elevator pitch, whatever it was. The first thing I'd want to know is who's your audience?
mhm,
Why are you talking to this audience?
yeah.
What is it that this audience is hoping to get out of you? And then
Mm,
I'd want to know what is your objective of your speech? And I like to start, just like training, you've got to start with the conclusion first, because
Mm,
training, we need to know what is the objective of this training.
yeah.
I've seen so many people, even with speeches, with training, is they get so wrapped up in the trying to start it at the beginning, trying to and with no destination in mind. It's like
Mm.
going on a trip. If I'm going to go to Melbourne, where are you? Melbourne?
I'm in Melbourne. That's correct. Yeah.
Melbourne. So if I'm going to leave Atlanta to go to Melbourne, and well, if I'm going to leave, if I don't know the destination, I don't know how to pack. So I wouldn't even know I'm going to Melbourne.
Pick
So
some warm clothes would be handy right now.
right, exactly. But if you don't know the destination,
Mm,
then you don't know what travel mode you're going to use. You don't know what to pack. I don't know how much money. I don't know how many days I'm going to be there. I don't know anything. So you
mm,
have to have a destination first. You've got to have that objective first. And then once you understand, so what I like to say is, imagine it's now the end of your 30-minute presentation, for example. It's
mhm,
the end of your 30-minute presentation. Imagine you're standing in front of an audience and you're saying to them, today we learned 3 things about public speaking. We've learned that you need to know your audience. We learned that why it's important to have stories. And we've also learned it's important to have a conclusion. So now those 3 things right now are the 3 main points of my presentation.
mhm,
Know your audience, use stories, have a conclusion, a compelling conclusion. That now becomes my opening. Today,
mhm.
we're going to look at know your audience, use stories, have a compelling conclusion. So you got to start with the destination first.
Yeah, I love that. If we want to take that a little deeper, because you also talk about engaging and inspiring your audience. How do we take that to that next level of so that it is an engaging and inspiring presentation that captivates them? As you said, creating an unforgettable
Mhm.
experience.
Yeah. This is tapping into another one of the principles of engagement, which is the principle of primacy and recency. So,
Mm,
and I'm going to test this now. Damien, do you remember your first car?
yeah.
And
Yes.
what about your third car? If you've had that many cars, can you quickly think of your third car?
Not as no, I can't exactly.
Okay.
Yes, now I can, but yes, it took a
Okay.
while. Yes.
It takes a little while.
Yeah.
And the reason I would imagine that the reason that you and many others would remember their first car, because that's a big deal when you get
Yeah.
that very first car, or that
Mm,
first day you get your driver's license. Or
yes.
for me, it's also my first day in the military. I'll
Yes.
never forget it. It was like yesterday.
Yes.
And those are very impactful experiences.
Mm,
So as a presenter, the principle of primacy is creating that initial opening, that impactful
mm,
opening that your audience is going to remember, because as adults, we remember impactful firsts
mm,
and we remember impactful lasts, which would be the
yeah.
conclusion. So that would be part of how to create that compelling, engaging uh, presentation. Is you've got to create that impactful opening where you get them right in the beginning. They're leaning in. I see the value. I understand the value. I need to listen to Damien because I know that when we get to the end, I'm going to have a better understanding of how to run my business.
Mm, I love that, and you've got to have that ending there where you need to bring it home, basically. How do
Yep.
you create that next level as well? Because following on from that with what you're teaching,
Mhm.
it's creating a connection with your audience as well. What are some ways you can create that connection with the audience
Mm.
so that they have that, you create that rapport so they trust and they want to? You've got this, you've created that opening, but how do you
Mhm.
create that connection?
Well, great question. One way that you can create it in the virtual world, and it's the easiest, cheapest way to create a connection, is to look directly into the camera when you're talking to your audience. And and I'm sure that you and your listeners have all seen it, where you've got that presenter. I've got three screens, well, four screens if you include that one back there, but I've got three screens, and many times I'll have all of the participants on this screen over here, but I'm talking to the participants. I'm looking at them in the eyes. But how is that coming across to you as the viewer? I'm not
Mm,
looking at you, correct?
yes,
I'm not engaging you at all.
correct.
So this is the challenge, that as presenters, at minimum, virtually, your opening, your conclusion, when you're asking questions, when you're answering questions, when you're telling stories, you should be looking directly into that camera and creating that engagement, that intimacy with your audience. Yes, I know in the virtual world that there are times I'm going to have to look at my notes. I'm going to have to look at this screen. I'm going to have to look at that screen. I'm going to have to solve a problem, move something around. Yes, all of those things happen. But at minimum, opening, conclusion, stories, answering questions, asking questions, you're looking directly into that. Another way of engaging the audience is to, well, if you know people by their names, is to address them by their name. If you asked a question, Damien, that's a great question. Damien, I'm
Mm,
glad you asked me that question. And acknowledging the questions and thanking people for those questions.
yeah.
And and I guess it's involving them. If I knew that you've worked with this software in the past, well, Damien, I know that you've worked with this software. Can you tell
Mm,
us a little bit about your experience working with this software? So that's another thing. Another would be um, asking a polling type question at the beginning of your session. How many
mhm,
people here struggle with presentation skills?
yeah.
Well, if nobody raises their hand, number one, they're probably lying. But and
So you
the other
rephrase it.
is,
How many people don't struggle with?
right, how many people don't struggle? Oh, yeah, me. I don't never struggle. I don't never get nervous.
Good, come up the front.
Good, you teach this. But that's also involving them right at the very beginning, maybe
Yes.
asking a follow-up question. If you raised your hand that you struggle, what is it that you struggle with, Damien? Can tell me a little bit more. But trying not to put people on the spot, trying to be sensitive as well.
Mm, I
And
love
I,
that.
I
They're
probably
great
can come
tips.
up with I can probably come up with a half a dozen more, but that's some.
Yeah, I love that. There's so many great tips there as well. And like you say, looking and the component too, looking down the barrel of the camera is important. But like you said, in real life, if you're doing a in-person presentation, you won't be looking directly in the eyes of the person the whole time. So yeah, you can look at other things and do that. That's part of normal
Mhm.
conversation.
Yeah.
I think something that people struggle with a lot, I know I did many, many years ago, was this connection of bridging the gap between the needs of the audience and the subject matter of what you're talking about. What are ways that people can do that to actually create a deeper connection with the audience, but also make it more engaging to cover all those things that you just talked about?
That's a great question. One of the icebreakers that I would use in the classroom would be splitting the classroom into small groups, having flip chart paper, several of them around the room, having each small group be it one of those flip chart papers, and I'd ask them, what is it that you're looking to get out of this workshop this week or this day or whatever? And now I have a list, all of these lists around the room of what all of these people feel is most important to them to get out of this workshop. And one of the
Mm,
things I make sure that I do is we go through those lists. And what I have found over the years that I've been training is that there no, I don't get any surprises. Every time I do this, it's basically the same stuff. that
Yeah.
they put on here every single time.
Mhm.
And I look around the room and most of them are identical. So it's not a surprise, but because because now they have provided their input,
Mhm.
they now have more buy-in
Mhm.
because I've addressed each of those flip chart papers. And whenever we break for lunch, we review them. What have we covered so far? What do we need to cover? After lunch, we've gone through it again. At the end of the day, we review it again. They're involved. It's there. I'm training what they need.
I love that. And if we take that a step further, and you covered off a lot of great things as to how to connect, let's flip the other side. Let's go to the dark side, because I can sense the force is strong in you. Um, can we look at from the perspective of when people creating barriers between their communication with the audience, and whether it's the audience, whether you're doing a workshop presentation or whether you're actually communicating one-on-one and explaining to an employee maybe of how they need to do things, what are some things that people shouldn't do, because that'll create a barrier between that effective communication happening?
Wow. Well, there's many things that can create the barrier, but probably the biggest, something we talked about earlier, is not listening. And one of the
Mm,
things that really disturbs me is if I'm asking a question to the facilitator and
mhm,
they cut me off and then they start answering a question. It wasn't what I was going to ask, but
mhm,
because they cut me off and didn't give me time to finish my question,
yeah,
they start responding with something that had nothing to do with what my initial question was.
mhm,
Me personally, I shut down at that point. So that's one way of shutting down your audience. Another example I'll use is many times we'll hear a facilitator say, "Don't worry, there's no dumb questions. Ask any question you want." And then somebody asks a question. Okay, we'll call it the dumb question. And then the facilitator says, "That's the stupidest question I've ever heard." And that's going to shut down the people. So it all comes back to listening, and I think it also comes back to talking and telling.
mm,
If the instructor gets up there and says, "Oh, this is going to be so engaging," and all they do is talk
mhm,
for the next 20 minutes, or they don't observe, they say we're going to take a break at a certain time and we don't break at a certain time, we're going to take lunch at a certain time, we don't break at lunch, the lunch has now been delivered, it's sitting in the back of the room, we can all smell it, but this idiot is still talking in front of the room, and now we've all tuned out. So
yeah,
those are some extremes, but I think it all comes back to not knowing your audience, not having empathy for your audience, not listening to your audience. All I think will be the biggest barriers. There are other things that create barriers, and some of them are technical, like the room is too cold, the room is too hot,
mm,
the room is not set up correctly, the equipment that we're supposed to use is not working right, the
mm,
manuals weren't delivered, the PowerPoint isn't working, the instructor shows up late. All of those things can contribute to barriers as well.
mm. I love that component where you're talking about listening from that perspective. How does someone, and because I was guilty of this, like probably a lot of people, is someone would be talking to me and I'm immediately thinking about what I'm going to say next, and I haven't finished talking yet. How do you, can you give us some tips for how to actually get out of that mindset where you're actually really listening?
My suggestion would be to take an improv class. And I have taken a couple of them. I've done
Mm,
stand-up comedy workshops as well, but
uh-huh,
in improv, you 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 can't you've got to be open. You
mm,
can't really have a goal in mind. You've got to listen. Listening is the
yeah,
most important. But again, I'm going back to listening, because let's say we're going around in a circle and there's
mhm,
5 people and I'm going to be the fifth person in line. And the story, and let's say we're all adding to the story that's going
Mm.
around the room. So the first guy starts the story, and so immediately I say, when it gets to me, I'm going to say this. Well, by the time it gets to me, that story's out there in left field somewhere. And if I do say what it is I'm going to say, it just wouldn't make any sense at all. So
Yeah.
you have to be open. You've got to be listening.
Mm.
And yeah, there's so many stories of the TV reporter that asked a question. The person responded to the question, and because that reporter wasn't listening, they asked a question of something that person just said. Yeah.
Yes.
So improv would be one way to correct that.
I love what you just talked about then about not knowing where it's going, because a lot of times, I know from my experience anyway, I'd already assumed what they were going to say, so I was preparing a response. But what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that you put that aside and you actually go, I don't know where this is going to go. I need to find out. Is
Mhm.
that?
Yeah. It's just being more my wife says, "Be more interested than
Mm,
interesting."
yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Now, to get into some more serious matters, being Santa, how has
Mm,
that helped presentation skills?
uh, excellent question. Well, it tests your improv skills. You never know what anybody is going to say, especially children. You have no idea. I've got a standard shtick somewhat of a standard script that I have that I use as my foundation. I've been doing Santa Claus for 30 years, and I've been Santa Claus in just about every type venue and event that you can imagine, from having Playboy bunnies to truck drivers and everything and anything in between, sitting on my knee. But so you have to be open.
Yeah.
And Santa also teaches me that it's not David that's there, it's the character of Santa that's there. So
Mm,
it's kind of it's you're hiding behind that mask, so to speak.
yeah.
Uh, and so, yes, improv skills, listening skills,
Mm,
even though many times as Santa, the children that are sitting on my knee, many times I can't hear what they're saying because one, because of all the noise that's going on around me. Number
mhm.
two, they're sitting on my knee and they're facing away from me. And and people, if you know children, a lot of times when they get shy or nervous, you barely can hear them talking. And then
Yeah.
so what I've learned to do as Santa is never say, What? Speak up, kid. I can't hear you." I don't do that. It's like, "Wow, that sounds like a lot of fun." It's always encouraging. Then many times
Ooh.
the parents will come to me and say, "What did he ask for?" I say, I don't know. I don't know. A Buick? I don't know." So Santa has taught me improv skills and listening, patience. Definitely patience.
Oh, patience is a big one, isn't it? I know
Yes,
I struggle with
yes.
that. I still struggle with that because I move really fast. I
Mm.
find, a lot of people I have to walk slower with.
To piggyback on that, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'2",
Mm,
and when I get into that suit, I'm even so much bigger. And because I've got a lot of times little kids walking around me,
yeah.
I have to walk slow. I've got to take it slow because if I walked at a fast pace, I'd be knocking them down like bowling pins.
Yeah, I love that. So tell the audience about the work that you do. Can you give us a summary of the services that you offer? How you can, we'll put these in the show notes, but can you, and how people can contact you? What are the best ways to reach out to you?
Well, the two best ways to reach me, number one is through LinkedIn.
Mhm.
If you find another David Doerrier on LinkedIn, let me know because as far as I know, I'm the only, well, as far as Doerrier, you'll find my brother Mark and my sister Sharon on there because they'll use Doerrier, but no other David. So I post every day on LinkedIn, tips and tricks about presentation skills. And you can definitely contact me through LinkedIn and my website,
Mm.
presentyourwaytosuccess.com. And you'll find many buttons on my website where you can set up a 30-minute one-on-one meeting with me to talk about anything about presentation skills. And if you'd like to take it a little bit further with a one-on-one coaching session, or if you want to discuss coaching for your team of trainers or salespeople or managers, we can talk about that as well. So my website and LinkedIn.
I love that. And can you give us a bit of a summary? I know you just touched on it there, but can you expand a little bit of the services that you offer?
Right. Thanks. So I offer one-on-one coaching. A
Mhm.
lot of the coaching that I do is virtual. And if someone is in Australia and wants the coaching to be face-to-face and they're willing to pay for it, I'd be more than happy to travel to Australia to do the coaching. But I can do the coaching very effectively virtually with one-on-one. I offer small packages, medium-sized packages, larger packages. A lot of it is designed, all of it is customized for
Mm.
you and your objectives and your speaking goals. Whether you are new to speaking, you have some experience with speaking, or even if you're an experienced keynote speaker, I know that I can bring value to your presentation by bringing that third eye. Earlier you were asking some of the value that I bring. That definitely is that third eye.
Mm.
I know that I have a coach because a lot of times I miss stuff. Not a
Mm.
lot of times, all the time I miss stuff. And my coach is able to help me to see things very differently. So I offer one-on-one coaching and team coaching as well.
I love that. And that what you're talking about, that third eye, that sensitivity, it's
Mhm.
something, and I think certainly men definitely need to embrace. Women seem to naturally do that, but men, we have that ability, and when we embrace that, it gives us so much more power. So I love that you brought that up. Before we go, I'm going to put you on the spot here in the hot seat. You're in the hot seat. Can you give the audience a key takeaway? What would you want them to take away from this interview?
The biggest takeaway is that, well, number one, for those folks that are nervous come when they speak, let me let you know that if you are nervous, guess what? You're normal. Everybody is nervous. Even the professionals get nervous. Tony Robbins gets nervous before an event, but
Mm.
it's natural to be nervous. What the key is learning how to take that nervousness. Well, maybe changing the mindset. It's not nervousness, it's excitement. I'm excited to get in front of this audience. I'm
Energy.
excited to energy and using that because it's the same type of energy. Whether you're nervous or whether you're
Mm.
excited, it's that same gut feeling that you have. It's the mindset that we have. So also know that your audience wants you to be successful. Usually there's only one person in that room that feels that that presentation is going to go south. Can you guess who that one person is? Exactly. It's the speaker. Everybody else in the room wants you to be successful.
Mm.
Everybody that's watching virtually wants you to be successful. They want to be entertained. They want to be engaged.
Mm.
But a lot of times I get nervous. I was nervous before coming here today. So it's normal. It's natural. So that's one thing I'd like people to understand. It's okay.
I love that, what you're talking about there, and I make a reference. I love pop culture references, and I reference the movie Crocodile Dundee, where they talk about a psychiatrist and says, "Don't have a psychiatrist in Walkabout Creek. If we have a problem, we tell Wally. Wally tells everybody else, no more problem." And what you're talking
Mhm.
about there is recognizing that people are experiencing the same thing as you're experiencing. I love that as a key takeaway. Thank you, David. That's I think really profound to get and integrate into your own operation is that, if you are feeling nervous, that's okay. Everybody else feels that as well.
Mhm.
David, it has been so wonderful having you on the show, sharing your knowledge and wisdom, taking us through your Santa Claus experience, jumping in the DeLorean, traveling back in time, and opening up about you being shy and going through that and sharing that with the audience as well. Because I think it's really important to understand when we're talking about growing revenue and profit, the key impediment to that is yourself, and being able to
Mhm.
work through things like you have done in your life. You can achieve amazing things for your business and your business's growth. David, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you, Damien. Thank you.